Hello to everybody. My name is Jonah Rosenblum. I'm sports editor of the Daily Northwestern. I'm joined here today by football beat writers Josh Walfish and Colin Becht. Well, an interesting matchup this weekend. Northwestern has won 3 straight games. They've climbed their way back to 500, and now the Wildcats take on the Golden Gophers at home with a chance to clinch bowl eligibility for the 5th straight season. Let's start with you, Josh. Northwestern has 3 straight wins. They're doing well. Minnesota not doing so well. Minnesota has a 2-8 record, 1-5 in Big Ten play, and 4 of their last 5 losses have been by 27 or more points. But they beat Iowa. So how bad a team is this? Is this a team that's capable of upsetting Northwestern? What can we expect from the Golden Gophers?
This team is very capable of upsetting Northwestern. You look at it, they beat Iowa at home. They went into East Lansing. They gave the Spartans, who are now atop the Legend Division, a very good fight. So this team's a very senior-laden and talented team, unlike the Indiana team. That's the other Big Ten team that's struggling. That being said, the biggest problem for Northwestern is going to be, can their defense hold up against a dual-threat quarterback? But we'll get to that later.
And meanwhile, now we've discussed Minnesota and their recent struggles. Let's talk a little bit about Northwestern and that last game that the Wildcats played against Rice. And, Northwestern won 28-6. It was a pretty easy game, and much like we all expected. The question is did the Wildcats play well? They won by a lot, but did they play well? It was kind of a shaky game. They got off to a real slow start. We're up just 7-0 after 25 minutes. What do you take from this game overall?
Well, you said Jonah was a little bit of a slow offense start, and 28 points doesn't really stand out as a dominant offensive performance. But still keep in mind, they had over 500 yards of total offense. They were certainly moving the ball well. And the offense, it's been fine pretty much the entire season. I'm not worried about them only scoring 28 against Rice. What stands out more to me from the Rice game was the fact that they basically shut out Rice. Rice's one touchdown came after most of the second stringers went for Northwestern on defense. So I think that's really more impressive. And yes, it was still against Rice's offense, but the confidence that comes from shutting down a team all game should certainly carry over into the Minnesota game. Yeah,
Northwestern's defense certainly playing well. The one issue is the Wildcats are up against their old nemesis, the dual-threat quarterback. And the question is, this defense handled Rice beautifully. They've been playing well, but can they handle Marquise Gray? Because Marquise Gray is a dual-threat quarterback. He is not the best passer in the world, but he does present a challenge to the Wildcats, correct?
Oh, definitely. Talking to defensive coordinator Mike Hankovich earlier this week, he said that Marquise Gray is as fast as Taylor Martinez and as Denard Robinson, but just like 2 times bigger. The 6'4", 240, it's going to be a tough task for Northwestern to tackle Marquise Gray. That being said, he is probably about as good of a passer as Denard Robinson. So that could bode well for Northwestern. He's only thrown 7 touchdowns. He's thrown 7 interceptions. So he's going to be more of a threat to Northwestern with his feet. If they can stop him using his feet, I think they'll have no problem.
And maybe if they can force some turnovers, because I'll say it right this time, Marquise Gray, very sophisticated. Marquise Gray, he only has 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, so clearly lacks accuracy, and that could be a problem.
Jerry Kill, very critical of me when I mispronounced his name in July at Big Ten Media Days.
I'll bet. I hope he doesn't call in to us or call into the office and yell at me too. Anyway, let's move on a little bit to, we've talked about Marquise Gray now. Let's talk a little bit about Northwestern's quarterback, who had some big problems of his own last weekend. Very unusual. Persa only has 6 interceptions on the season, but he had 2 picks against Rice. So that's a negative. The positive, of course, Dan Persa and Jeremy Ebert is probably the cutest couple in town. I mean, they're getting the ball all over the place. So tell me a little bit about first the picks and then the Persa to Ebert connection that's worked so well in recent weeks.
Well, the picks really just Persa didn't put enough into the passes. It was a windy day. The ball sort of hung up in the air. And, Pat Fitzgerald said he really wants to see his wide receivers do a better job of coming back to the ball and at least making it tougher on the defensive backs to catch those balls. So Persa really didn't get any help from the wide receivers, even if they weren't the strongest throws of the year. As you said, the connection with Ebert, though, has been very strong and certainly stood out from the Rice game. In his past 2 games, Ebert's now got 13 catches for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns. And, the Minnesota defense is last in the Big Ten in total defense, so there's no reason why Persa and Ebert can't continue the string of success they've had recently.
That's very true, and Jeremy Ebert was really good against Rice, wasn't he? I mean, he finished with 208 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, including that 90-yarder. And what stood out to me on the 90-yarder was his speed. I mean, the kid can run, just flat out can run. And so the question is will that speed be enough to carry him to the NFL? And so let's start out our prediction segment of the show. with, is Jeremy Ebert a viable NFL prospect, Colin?
He's a viable NFL prospect, definitely. Whether he'll be drafted, I'm not so sure about. Maybe he could get there in their later rounds. I think more likely he'll do what a lot of the elite players from Northwestern have done recently, which is where they don't get drafted, but they get a shot as a free agent, and they end up making the squads in a lot of cases. So I think he'll certainly get a shot at the NFL, and then hopefully for Northwestern he will make the most of that opportunity and get on an NFL team.
Maybe join the rest of the Northwestern also-rans on the Chicago Bears or something like that. What about you, Josh? What do you think?
I agree. Jeremy Ebert will be on a training camp roster come July. But I'm going to make a bold prediction because I know just how much Jeremy Ebert loves the spotlight. I'm going to say he becomes Mr. Irrelevant and has a whole parade dedicated to him in Northern California over the summer.
Wow. Interesting prediction. Very interesting prediction. And I guess that gets us off to a pretty good start with our game predictions because Josh really opening it up here. We've talked about California. We've talked about Jeremy Ebert. Let's talk about Northwestern, Minnesota. And I've got two questions for you. Number one, who wins the game? And then number two, the most important question, of course, is what will the attendance be like? Are we talking sellout or are we talking overcapacity?
Well, I think, Jonah, we're probably still a number of years away from a Northwestern Minnesota game exceeding capacity. For the game on the field, I think Northwestern wins this one pretty comfortably as the offense just has a field day. I'll say 38-17. Attendance, we'll go with 27,500.
A sore mistake on your part. Golden Gopher Nation, they travel. Boy, did they travel. What a crowd. Anyway, Josh, let's get to you.
In front of a crowd of 22,300 people. Northwestern 31, Minnesota 17.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it, what happens? Anyway.
It's still a W.
It's still a W, right? And exactly. That's what's going to happen this weekend. But first, before I get to exciting things like Northwestern, Minnesota, let's get to even more exciting things like Buffalo, Miami. Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins this weekend. Biggest NFL game, biggest game of the season. And obviously the Bills are going to come out on top 28-7. That's easy. That's whatever. Anyway, moving on. The biggest prediction of all, well, I'm not sure which one's bigger, but anyway, Northwestern will beat Minnesota. It'll be easy. 35-14 will be a nice game to kind of put on cruise control, have a good time out there at Ryan Field. And unfortunately, not that many people will be having a good time out there at Ryan Field. I'm going to say 24,000, with all due respect to Golden Gopher Nation. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. For Josh Walfish and Colin Becht, I'm Jonah Rosenblum. Please follow us on Twitter at The Daily Sports. You can also follow us online at dailynorthwestern.com for all of our live coverage from Ryan Field. Thank you so much and have a great evening.